And we are mostly live. Except for me, who's obviously dead.
I think we're live in quotation marks. Okay. Game face. This is literary... Oi.
It's 5 fucking in the morning, dude.
Yeah, I feel your pain. Okay. Come a sec. This is Literary Roadhouse. One short story, once a week. I'm Gerald.
I'm Anais.
I'm Remy.
And I'm Maya. And like I said, it's 5 o'clock in the morning. And that early in the morning, sometimes my mouth gets away with me. So if you have small children, please check the podcast notes or iTunes to see if I managed to keep my mouth in check or if I had potty mouth this morning.
But if you don't get a chance to check, just assume that it usually is, so.
Language warning. The true story. But before Gerald summarizes the story, I just want to let everyone know that the Literary Roadhouse Book Club is now available on our website, iTunes, or the podcatcher of your choice. It's a once-a-month podcast that discusses full-length novels the first Friday of every month. Last week, we discussed The Heart Goes Last by Margaret Atwood, and on February 5th, we'll be discussing Fates and Furies by Lauren Groff.
Thank you, Anais. If you haven't yet read Prepositions by Lionel Shriver and don't want to hear any spoilers for the story, pause the podcast, read the story, it won't take long, and then return. I first heard this story as a radio broadcast on the wonderful BBC. It takes the form of a letter from a woman who lost her husband in a road traffic accident on the morning of the 9/11 terrorist attacks, comparing her life to the recipient of the letter, a friend who also lost her husband on the same day, but he was working in the Twin Towers. It compares the very different lives they've led and what a huge difference there is between the prepositions in and on, as in husbands dying in 9/11 as opposed to on 9/11.
Okay. Excuse me. So let's just start at the top. How did everybody like this story, just on a general level?
I loved it.
I knew you were going to love it, Gerald.
Yeah.
I didn't like it at first, but then I liked it. It took me a good, I printed it out. It took me 2 pages to get me, and then it got me. How about you two?
Go Anais.
Okay. I really loved it. I loved it right from the beginning. Yeah, I'll just leave it there for now.
So, Remy, how much did you hate this story?
No, I mixed feelings. A little slightly more skewed toward the negative side, but it's mixed.
Okay. Well, I think this is a good balance for today's show. So why don't we just talk a little bit about, what it was that we liked about the story. For me personally, the language was really natural. There wasn't anything special about the language. It literally read like a letter to me. It was nice, but the very first opening kind of didn't catch me, and then it kind of slowly reeled me in. I think what reeled me in was the fact that this is something that isn't really talked about, and it was touching on some really interesting emotions. It was touching on some things that people think but don't necessarily say, and I found that really interesting, and I think this was a good way to approach it in a story.
Yeah, I probably should stay quiet on this podcast because I don't think there's anything I don't like about this story. I like the idea. I think it's a very clever idea to juxtapose 2 stories separated by a different preposition. I love the language. It's an easy read. It's a natural read. There's some very clever and beautiful parts, I thought, in it, so we'll come on to that later. So there's not a lot I don't like about this story.
Well, I'm glad that you say that, because I think that, I would like to bounce some things off of you as we get further into the show. How about you, Anais?
So you know how Netflix has really specific genres? Reading the story, I discovered that one of mine is bottled up frustrations for years that explode in really poised ways. Like, I just like the idea that she was like stewing on this for 10 years, and it's this truth that I think for me it also felt very kind of personally true, right? Because so growing up in the New York City area, everyone has a 9/11 story, but you do have this sort of in the back of your mind, even though you know it's wrong, there is this kind of like scoreboard of the bona fides. I like that she used the word bona fides.
Yes.
And that felt very true to me.
Yeah, I very, very true. I wasn't even in New York, and yeah, totally.
Mm-hmm. It kind of reminded me how a little bit like shortly after the more recent attack in Paris, people start posting all the pictures of them in Paris, and it's like trying to attach themselves through some sort of like bona fide to something where it's like you were there in like 2003. Like there's no connection, you know. Like it had, yeah. It made me think of that too.
Je suis Remy.
No, I like the idea of it, and it's actually something I think I thought of before. In that how like it must suck for like people who died on 9/11 because and not in the attacks itself, just because like people they might not get any attention or whatnot. So
I think the only thing worse would be to die on 9/10.
It's not funny.
Sorry. It's 5 in the morning.
I know what you mean, though. Yeah.
No, I don't.
Yeah.
What do you mean? I think just because nobody cares? Or what?
Well, you die, everyone's upset, and then all of a sudden you're totally forgotten for the next like 2 months. Oh yeah, Grandpa died. We forgot.
Oh. Yeah.
You have no kudos for dying on the 10th of September.
Yeah, I think I liked it. What else were you gonna say, Remy, before I so rudely interrupted you with my giggles?
Oh no, that's it. You can talk about Grandpa now.
Be nice, be nice. I'm trying to be good. I get a little loopy in the morning.
No, I'm not. But no, I mean, I like the idea, but when we get into the things you didn't like, I can comment on that.
Yeah, I think this might be a good spot for it. Just get it out of the way. Because I mentioned a couple times that the beginning of this did not catch me. And Gerald looked all offended when I said that. Like I had killed his puppy.
No, for me, I was actually curious to see like how it was gonna go from the beginning. But for what I didn't like, and all right, just to sort of preface, I know that it's probably intentionally done, but it still kind of left me feeling uneasy, is the tone. It's like, it felt like this spiteful, kind of like envious diatribe, and I felt like there was some sort of victim shaming to it, which I didn't really
It's interesting you say that, because I had the same sense. It's really interesting you said that. I kind of shoveled it to the side, but yeah.
Yeah, and I think it ties back sort of like to what we touched on briefly in last week's story, Year's End, where we said, is there, an acceptable time period for like mourning a loss, but for everyone, it's personal. So I don't know what gives someone the audacity to say, oh, my loss is harder than yours or something like that. Like,
one of the things that two things but about what you just said, because it did strike me as spiteful, and the point of the story is so important that I don't want to write it off as, oh well, she's just spiteful, and that negative tone, like it needed to be negative, but I think it was slightly off the mark. Because I think if someone were reading this with a less open mind, they could write off the point of the story as, well, she's just a negative, spiteful person. Look at her saying she's more victimized than the other person. And so it made me a little uneasy, but that's not what bothered me about the story. The opening of the story, there was a lot of, I don't know how you would do this, but I felt like there was a lot of background information on the couples and how they met and stuff like that wouldn't necessarily be in a letter, because the person that's getting the letter knows this.
That's true.
And And it turned me off. In particular, there was one line that significantly turned me off. And when I read it, I cringed. And it's on that hiking trip through the Sinai Desert where we all met. What brought our two couples together was a shared disinclination to complain. The person that's saying this is party of one of the couples, and it sounds so just clinical and not like something someone would say to their close friend, even if they're having an argument, that it turned me off. And it took me another page to recover from it, which isn't, I mean, yeah, I'm being nitpicky, and this isn't the 5 a.m. thing. Like, I read this when it wasn't 5 a.m. and it bothered me. So I'm not going to write it off as me just being annoying and bitchy because it's early in the morning. But the opening of the story really bothered me, and it took me several paragraphs to recover and to get really into the story. And then once I got into it, I loved it.
So I think for me that opening, I think you're right that the writing throughout, there's some moments where it's very writerly in a way that I'm like, this is not a dog walker. But there is this, I think that whole thing about what brought us together is that we don't like to complain. It's because it's a transition for her saying, I acknowledge
so
what I'm doing. She does. She says, we don't like to complain, and I acknowledge that I am complaining right now with this letter. And I think part of the reason why the letter's written so cold and clinically is because the woman, what she's trying to do is somehow still maintain a friendship while blowing up this thing that she's never uttered before to her friend. It's the first, they're not having an argument. Sarah has no idea that Rachel feels this way, and it's like this sudden blow up. And it's like, I feel like be like, Rachel, just so you know, this isn't going to go over well. But, you know, kudos for trying. Like, here she is blowing this up.
Yeah, I just felt like there were so many points where the character voice was really off.
It's strange because I don't feel that at all. I think the introduction was it was essential for the reader, but also it showed in the letter. It showed that they had a deep friendship. That it's not the letter and the complaints are not made from a point of view of not caring, and it's also, I don't think she's trying to shame. Although it comes across in a couple of parts like that, she's not trying to shame Sarah for what her experiences of the past 10 years. But I think she's trying to put the story straight, and she's trying to show that their lives have been very different because of the different circumstances.
Yeah, I actually agree with you, Gerald. There was just a tone that was slightly off.
Well, don't sound so surprised.
No, I mean but it comes off okay. Even if you say she's not shaming, she definitely is jealous, and she's jealous. She's like, okay, you didn't even have a job before, and now you're like giving speeches. Like, oh, what do you want from this person? Like, they're trying to make the most of what happened to them and move on with life, and you're here like, you know, saying, oh, you didn't have this before and now you have that and all this stuff.
Those are natural emotions. Like, I can see that in a character. I just don't think that the character is consistent throughout the letter.
I think for me I fall somewhere in the middle. So I don't think it's, as Gerald says, where it's like she's just trying to show her these differences. No, it's more than just showing her the differences, but I don't think it's quite as spiteful as the tone that Rami used. For me, it's more like she's saying, look, we need to have a real talk right now, which is, this loss was horrible for you, because she's careful to say over and over, it shattered your life. Losing David was a big deal. You still lost your husband, so did I. That sucks. I know what that is.
But stop being a selfish twat and pay attention to me, too.
But it's your apology if you apologize and then add but to it. It's something.
It's not an apology. She's not apologizing for anything, Rami. What is she apologizing for?
All the time. Or not apologize, but like show empathy, right? It's like this, but, and then continue. That but right there just like completely negates everything you said in the beginning.
Okay, but it's also been 10 years, right? I know, but it's been 10 years, and I think what she's saying is it isn't quite like you didn't have a job and now you have a job. I think it's more like, we both lost our husband that day, and that sucks for both of us. But can you please acknowledge that in some way your loss is privileged because you have been able to build something from it, and I've done nothing but spiral downwards, and nobody sees this. It's completely invisible, and I feel like I've slipped through the cracks. And and there is a bit of jealousy there, but I don't think it's like a you shouldn't have this. It's just a can you acknowledge this at least?
And I agree with you too, because I actually think that is the point of the story.
Yeah.
But there are points in the story where I did underline it and write jealousy. There was one point where I wrote anger, ignored sympathy, on the other party's part, where she was feeling the anger and the jealousy because she's been ignored in this well of sympathy. There were parts that were really negative, but I enjoyed them. My only question is, it could turn off a reader because this is a really touchy subject. And this is a subject that I would like to think lots of people would read and think about because this is important. And having such a negative tone in certain parts could turn off a reader to the point where they just ignore the point of the story. But I'm not going to fault them for it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think she was very brave to take on this subject, and to point out the other side of some of the stories on that day. And I think too often we, as in, I suppose, Western society, wrap ourselves in flags and mourn and grieve, and to me, it's like I said the other day, last week, when someone was still getting over the loss of their mother after 3 years. Just get over it. So
and we see that a lot here. Whenever there's a young black person that's killed and they make the news, and you're like, what happened to the other 36 that died today? You see that on Twitter. There's a lot of that, and it's a perfectly natural human emotion, and it's something nobody really talks about. I wanted to point out the point where I noticed that I was in the story. Because I said very loudly that the beginning of the story was a total turn-off for me. Did not like it. And then I got to this line. That was the last time we spoke. I forgot to say I love you. We didn't say it all the time. We didn't want it to get tired. There was something about the way that was written. There was a tonal shift a little bit, and it just kind of pulled me in, and that's the point where I really fell in love with the story. For me, my problems with the story really were at the beginning of the story and some slight tonal issues as far as the character being consistent. But there's something that happened right on that third page that really pulled me into the story, and I really enjoyed it.
About the beginning, for me, it didn't really faze me much because I viewed it more as an open letter. Even though it's made to look like it's a personal letter to a friend, I just viewed it, if you're writing an open letter to be published in a newspaper or something, you're going to give that background for other people to be aware of, the context and stuff.
That's an interesting way of reading it, Ryan.
Yeah.
Good point. Yeah, I thought. I guess we'll come on to this in a bit, but Maya, when you said you thought the language was the writing was okay and nothing special, and I highlighted one bit which I thought was amazing, and it's Ms. Eisenberg, I should clarify, said the internist when he delivered the verdict, that would cordon me off forever, that would exile me in a small, tinny, unimportant world, a tiny, private, incidental world, while the rest of the country lived in the tumult of history, of shifting tectonic allegiances, of wars and counterinsurgencies, of great moral choices, grand speeches, and noble sacrifices.
I like that. I like that sentence. I do.
Yeah.
Who does that? When I read that, I thought that it reminded me of another writer, but I couldn't put my finger on it. But I read it, I was like, there's something about that tone that I like, and I think I've heard that before. And it was really nice. It was nice. There were parts in it that were really nice. What I mean when I say that the writing was really simple and nothing like exceptional is that it wasn't to the point where I was awed by the sentences on a regular basis. There were a few points that I was like, that were extremely elegant to me that stood out. But the story was, I don't want to say competent because I liked it more than that. I don't want to use like an Anaism. I don't want because I liked it more than that. But it wasn't the kind of writing that calls attention to itself. It felt like a letter. It felt like something that somebody would have written, with the exception of a few points where it kind of veered off. But I liked the fact it sounded like a letter. Like, that's what made it real for me, is there were points where it really did feel like it was written from somebody's heart. And that made it special.
Well, yeah, written from someone's heart, but from like a shriveled up kind of dark, because I think there is of resentment here. It's like, I don't think she's trying to, like, I don't think what she wants is a comeuppance from Sarah. I think what she wants is like an acknowledgement. Especially because Sarah sounds like sometimes she's been really tone deaf. Like, when you're complaining about 2.2 million because that's to the person who's like had to like move to Queens because she
didn't get a dime.
Yeah, like there were parts where I'm like, Sarah, you should stop talking right now. This is not your audience. Like, go talk to the other Wall Street widows from 9/11. Don't talk to Rachel about this.
And I know women like that. I know people like that.
Yeah.
I felt for this woman.
No, I was just gonna say, but there were some points where I like recoiled, where I'm like, because at the end she's like, we're still friends, still affectionate. I'm like, nah, this isn't. I don't know if the friendship's gonna survive this, because Sarah's gonna bristle really hard.
Yeah. This was a bridge burning letter. So, I'm so tired. Somebody take over my normal direction, please.
What direction would you like me to take it?
Well, normally I like guide the discussion, and I'm like barely hanging in there. So
I'm just gonna give some more of my thoughts. I don't know if hopefully it'll help. So I felt like it amounted to the author, not the author, but the main character. Who it's Sarah is the main one.
No, Sarah's a friend.
Who's Rachel then? Rachel, she's basically saying life's not fair. Okay. But the fact that her life took this downward spiral afterwards is still completely in her control. It's about your attitude and how you react to different things and what you do with your own life.
2.2 million doesn't drop into your lap because you had a good attitude.
No, but that it reminds me of, so there was a clip with Donald Trump. Okay,
oh God.
Interview. It was like, he said, it was really difficult starting out. I lived in Brooklyn and my father gave me a small loan of $1 million. However, people have different circumstances, and you make do with what you have. I'm not going to compare myself to Donald Trump.
But when your friend is sitting there looking at you, complaining to you that she only got 2.2 million, that's kind of rude.
Okay, no, that's a fair point. That's a fair criticism. Like, I'll give her that. But there were other things where, just the act of trying to equate. Okay, how about the millions of other people whose family didn't die on 9/11 in 9/11 also and didn't receive anything else? Are they also is everyone who didn't die in the 9/11 attacks supposed to feel bad because of the people who received compensation? I don't get it.
No, it's not, because it's not about everybody else. It's about these two women specifically and their friendship specifically. It's for the past 10 years I've had to listen to your story, your complaining, which from my vantage point really sucks. And I've had to support you and say, there, it sucks, you only got 2.2 million, you should have gotten more, and say all these things that are correct while I've been sitting here stewing, letting this thing kind of like get ugly and manifest inside me, and this is now the end result of that. So it's not about anybody else. It's just these two women.
Exactly. Because the fact is, if you are a widow, regardless of how you lost your spouse, it hurts. But if you've got somebody acting as if, and the entire society acts as if their pain is more important than yours, that sucks.
I'm not sure. Like, obviously, I don't know, the backstory of this fictional narrative, but I'm not sure that Sarah was doing that. I think maybe Rachel was interpreting her doing that. Okay, this one complaint about the $2.2 million, okay. But besides that, I feel like she's just taken on, the natural attention that the world has given her by itself without anything that Sarah did herself just really bothered Rachel.
Well, no, because
But
Sarah also would say stuff like, "Well, at least you have a body. Can you please stop comparing?" Especially when you're
Oh, and at
surrounded
least
by
you
rich.
didn't have children.
Oh yeah, at least you didn't have children. At least you have a body. Like, why are you? She's also actively minimizing Rachel's loss.
Yeah.
and if you look carefully, quite often throughout the piece, every time she seems to complain, there's a little sort of side note, because it says about the $2.2 million, it says awarded you $2.2 million lump sum tax free, and you think, yeah, she's jealous there, and then she said, and you still objected it wasn't enough. So there's the little digs there that give us the impression that there is
It's not
something fairer.
necessarily the gift. It's a tone deaf.
Yeah,
It's
no,
the
I said I'll let that pass because I think I agree with you on that point. But I don't think I was just looking through. I don't think she tried to make not having children an advantage. I think again that was Rachel's own thoughts, where she was like, I didn't get a chance to have children. She did say at least you have a body to bury,
I think it's
but
interesting that you're so quick to believe the unspoken story. Like you're like, it's like you're trying to like assume Sarah's
it's
like
like your
counter.
mom on like
I know,
steroids.
like you're assuming like Sarah's counterpoint, and you're taking this imagined counterpoint as the fact over what Rachel's saying, which is fine. But it's like that the whole idea of like the unreliable narrator. Like you don't think this narrator is being truthful. That happens, but I'm wondering why that is. Like why you
it's
tend
because
to.
I don't agree with the perspective or that type of thinking. That things just aren't, and then she tries. So what's wrong with being a dog walker? Like she looks at, now I'm reduced to dog walking, and that in itself is like some sort of like lower
Well, from
shameful,
where she came from, it was a fall. She had a
Mhm.
from
home.
dog
She had,
training to dog walking.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
No,
yeah.
but I don't know. I don't
I
like
think,
the idea
okay,
of
I
it.
think we're running into a larger issue here.
Yeah.
And it's
Mhm.
one that I've seen before, but I haven't brought up. But I think maybe this is a good time to talk about, like, how our own perspectives affect how we read these stories.
Yeah.
Because when I read this story, I'm reading of these characters. And where my perspective comes in is after the fact when I'm thinking about it, about how I feel. But I keep that separate. I don't, like, just because I don't like the way a character is thinking about something doesn't mean that I change what I think the character should be thinking. I don't know if I'm getting that across.
No,
Just
so I
Anais,
guess for me,
make me make sense.
I wouldn't like this story if I think it sends the wrong message, and that's why I wouldn't recommend the story that I thought sends the wrong message, and I feel like this story for me falls into that criteria
Okay,
category.
so what is the wrong message? What
Uh,
is the message that you think that this story is sending that is wrong? What is the
that
message you think the story is sending? I think that might
life's
be a
not
better
fair.
question.
That life's not
Life
fair.
isn't fair. Shit
I
happens.
I disagree. I think
You
everyone has their own unique problems, and it all comes down to how well you can deal with it and juggle it. On
But
the
that doesn't
outside,
mean
it
life
might
is
seem
fair. Fair is a qualitative, fair is like a moral judgment. Either things are fair or unfair. Life
yeah,
just is life. And if the point of the story is that shit happens and that it's interesting that two people can have the same thing happen on the same day and have how it affects their lives be completely different, I think that is a valid thing for a story to be written about. And whether or not I agree with the story, I think it's an important story. I think it's an interesting story. And even if I don't agree with it, I'm not going to say, well, this story shouldn't, I don't agree, I don't like the story because I don't agree with it.
Mm.
And I think the point isn't just life's not fair. I think it's specifically, life's not fair, and here's one strain of it, which is we privilege some losses, we privilege some deaths over others, and some people get rewarded for losing someone in a certain way that other people don't. Um, which is something that we don't really talk about because we're supposed to say all grief is equal, no one's suffering more than anyone else. And I feel also like some of like the things that Rami's having issues with is one of the reasons why I like this story. Like the narrative that we say as a society is, well, if you did this or if you did that or if the bootstrap argument, if you worked harder or like if you did something else, where there's a part of me that's like, no, sometimes people do have a tougher lot and everyone has problems, but not all problems are equal, which is something that I think we don't talk about enough. And this story is doing that. It's doing it in a very personal way that kind of chafes a little bit, but I like it. Like
It's
I think,
uncomfortable, but I like it too. It's
yeah,
uncomfortable in an interesting way. One of the things that the story brings up that I thought was interesting was what is the definition of a 9/11 widow? Because everyone talks about and has heard about the people that died in the fire, but I never considered what happened to people that were going into labor or having a car wreck or having a heart attack when all the first responders were down on the scene. And the actual damage that happened when the towers fell was a much wider circle of damage than the given narrative. And I think that that also was extremely interesting, and it made me think about it.
in my I was gonna say my own family, my great grandfather slipped and fell in the bathtub and bumped like hit his head on the faucet and got a deep gash and needed stitches on 9/11, the morning as the towers were being hit. So my mom's like calling 911. No one's responding, so she has to like go to the hospitals. One of the hospitals that was actually taking people from, because some of them would come over into Jersey because it was quicker through the tunnel and the
Mm-hmm.
train, and she like couldn't. She was in the waiting room waiting for the longest time, and it was that like traffic jam of first responders, hospitals, everything like that.
Mm. Yeah, I didn't get that part of the story. She goes, when the doctor gets on the line and she says, this was unusually personable service, but you remember every doctor, nurse, and paramedic was on call, poised at every hospital in the city, and there was nothing for them to do. Why was there nothing for them to do?
Because there was no live
No,
bodies. There
no,
was ashes and body parts.
yeah.
Oh,
So
but I
all those
assumed there
people in
were
the hospitals were
injuries
called
too.
in. They didn't come in until a little bit later. It took a while for the injured to reach the hospitals. It was an absolute disaster. And then the people who were injured that needed to go to the hospital, they couldn't necessarily get to the hospital. Traffic was just, no one was moving.
Mm.
Can I just sort of come to a slightly different point where it illustrates the difference between the two, between Rachel and Sarah, and and Rachel's opinions and thoughts. And there's a section that relates to the mosque that they were planning to build.
Hmm.
And she says, you have fierce political opinions where before they were hazy, which has sometimes put us at loggerheads. So they've had discussions and different points of view. I pointed out that the Park 51 mosque is planned near Ground Zero, not at Ground Zero, and I, of all people, should understand the importance of prepositions. You were offended. The mosque was insensitive, you said, but we can't ban a particular religion from the whole area of New York. I said it's unconstitutional. You just kept repeating that word, insensitive. I got the message. My opinion didn't count. Your opinion was privileged. So,
I
so,
love that part.
so there again, because of what happened, this friend of hers who had hazy political opinions before, uh, and we all know people like that, suddenly became very politicized and couldn't make an argument, but just said it was offensive, it was insensitive to plan this mosque. But she had no reason to say that,
And
even
I
though it
remember
wasn't
stuff like that happening. I remember hearing that exact argument on the news
yeah,
afterwards. And people were really emotional, but not logical.
yeah.
And if you tried to be logical, people were offended.
And it is. I also, when politicians are using your group of people to champion something, you have to wonder. Like when I remember politicians saying stuff like, how would the families of the victims of 9/11 feel? How would the widows feel? Get their opinion in. Like when people are using you as a group to gain leverage in an argument, like there is some privilege there. Like you have
It
some
gives you power.
Yeah, there's a power there.
That you've not earned, you've not worked for. It's just been
David went to work.
through yeah, he just did his normal job. Whereas the other guy, the other husband, stopped to help someone. So in fact, and she makes a comment, something about.
He was just a nice guy.
He was a nice guy, and she was talking about the other people who die. 148 people die every day from strokes, traffic accidents, overdoses, or misguided acts of altruism, which is, it's a little nod to her husband. Within
Yeah,
that.
I thought it was really interesting, and it made me do a lot of thinking about things that I hadn't necessarily thought about. I've always been really torn with how about how things happened after 9/11. About how it was treated in the news, about things that happened to people. I had friends that were Sikh who were beaten up. Like it was not a pretty time, and people were willing to do anything to make it quote unquote better. And we're still living with the backlash of some of the decisions that were made in the after effects, the year or two after 9/11. And so I appreciate this story. Is it too soon? I feel like I don't freaking care if it's too soon. Part of me feels like maybe some of the reason why it bristles is because maybe, part of me feels like it is, but it's been a long time. It shouldn't be too soon, and I'm glad that, it made me uncomfortable.
Yeah, I don't think it's too soon. It's interesting too because it was written almost exactly 10 years on the 10th anniversary. And when I was looking at the date, before I even knew what the story was about, because it has a very misleading title, is that it was written on September 9th, 2011. I quickly read that as 2001, and I was like, whoa, that's 2 days before the attacks. But then I went back and I was like, no, it's 2011. It turned out to be about that very subject.
Well, it's funny you say that because I had the same experience. I thought it kept saying 2001, and no matter how many times I read it, 'cause I'm so used to reading that date, my eye kept correcting it to 2001. So then when she's like, your husband died on, I was like, I don't understand. Is she psychic? I don't, I thought it was a story about a psychic, telling her friend your husband's about to die.
I was going to ask where you guys were on 9/11, then I realized that, you two probably were in school, in elementary school.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
but I saw the World Trade Center smoking outside my classroom window,
Yeah.
but then the teachers closed the blinds.
I mean, I lived in the same area, so the same thing.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Quick point about I don't want to harp on this, but just to summarize my thoughts on it about this whole life's not fair thing, okay? I personally make a distinction between something being fair and equal or identical, okay? Because I think something can be fair without necessarily being exactly the same. And this ties back to my religious beliefs, where we believe God doesn't burden a soul more than what it can handle. So if something from your perspective seems relatively mild or something, it could still affect a person in a way that something else will affect you, and vice versa. They might think it's not a big deal, but it bears down on you. So in relating to this story, I wouldn't mind if Rachel was like, yes, this really hurt, but it's that comparison part that really bothers me, because I don't feel like she has a right to compare.
That's an interesting point from the religious angle. I thought it was the typical political angle where it's just because normally that line of don't compare is a way for the haves to keep the have-nots silent about their have-not status.
Yeah.
But the religious angle is different.
Yeah, which is interesting because my religion is probably, I won't pretend like it doesn't color how I read the story. Life is suffering. The point of life is how to escape suffering. There's a way to escape suffering, but not everyone's going to get it. And, there are certain steps you can take, and if they work, they work, and if they don't, suffer away. Yeah, all of our worldviews are going to color the stories we read.
And people suffer in different ways and from different things. So.
Yeah. I feel like I live in a much more world of gray than many people. I'm much more accepting of gray. I'm very wishy-washy that way. And a large part of that probably does come from my spiritual path. I'm not going to pretend like it doesn't. But at the same time, I like stories that stretch me. I like stories that challenge me. I like stories that make me uncomfortable. And I tend to seek those stories out, whereas other people would avoid those stories because they're not positive or they don't put across messages that people should reach towards. And I think it really depends on what you think story is for. What do you think, Anais?
Yeah, no, I was agreeing, nodding over here.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think what you said earlier about your worldview and your personal opinions, as you said off air, we've got some flooding up in the north of the country, and it was a few years ago when the government said that they were going to pause on the flood defence programme that was going to cost £800 million or something. And yet somebody's pointed out the fact that we're giving money to other countries to help with their flood defences. So you can see now. I don't agree with that. The two are very separate. But you can see why
flood defense systems for all.
Yeah, you conflate the two issues, but they're obviously very different. But yeah,
that's funny.
And going back to the worldview thing, of course I'm more sympathetic to this because I tend to be more sympathetic to the Rachel stories, which isn't that I'm not really vilifying Sarah because Sarah's been told for the past 10 years that everything she's doing is correct and right. I just like how brave Rachel is in saying, can we just acknowledge this uncomfortable truth? Which I just like. I like that. That's my Netflix very specific genre.
Yeah. I still don't know I can't say I agree with either of the two people. I think it's interesting, but I feel like I can sympathize with both sides.
Yeah, Sarah's not a bad person. Yeah. Sarah's not going around keeping Rachel down or anything. I think Sarah's going to be very surprised because Sarah probably really appreciates Rachel and doesn't realize
that she's been hurting her for 10 years.
Yep. Yeah. No idea.
There's nothing like realizing you've just been damaging somebody that you love and had no idea you were doing it.
I sometimes think about that because I know that I'll have a few people in my life where there's something I've never told them that they've done that hurts me or continues to hurt me, and I always wonder who are the people I've done that to and I have no idea. They must be out there.
Mm-hmm.
I have no idea who they are.
I like what you said about how this festered and exploded. That's what happens so many times. How many men have you heard? It's such a cliche now. The guy is like, I'm getting a divorce and I don't know what happened. We were so happy and she just served me divorce papers out of the blue. This is why. Because the guy's has no clue, and then one day she just gets fed up. Mm-hmm. And he doesn't even know why. And she's been festering for 15 years about this thing and that thing and all these things. And then one day it was just one toothpaste cap too many.
What, you left me because I
it had nothing to do with the toothpaste cap, but it was just the straw.
The straw. Yeah.
So are we ready to rate this thing, or do we have other things that we want to talk about this story?
I'm just thinking about how different my reaction would have been if in this letter Rachel said, I realize you've struggled a lot and it was difficult, but it was very difficult for me too. Rather than her saying that the same thing, but then she says, but it was more difficult for me than for you.
Does she say more difficult for me than for you?
Yeah, she does. She does.
No, she said.
She says, I believe my lot has been even harder.
Right, but
she has to put up with her.
And because she's in Queens now as a dog walker, and she didn't get
Okay,
any money and no
And she
workers
didn't get to keep
comp.
her house, and she didn't have to get to have her husband's baby.
again, there are still challenges in Sarah's life that Rachel might not realize as well. And about this whole like socioeconomic status thing, okay, just so we can just touch on this subject. Sarah's husband worked as an investment banker, whereas Rachel's worked as a chef. It's assumed from their occupations that Sarah originally had a higher, more privileged lifestyle to begin with anyway.
Yeah.
So it's like this whole workers' comp, like she's just stressing this so much, but initially she was probably better off financially anyway.
No, yeah, she always was, but still.
But it just okay. The thing is, if you're financially well off and you get to stay financially well off, that's very different than being on the borders of being middle class and struggling, and then all of a
For
sudden
sure.
getting nothing and losing everything.
But it's still
It's
relative.
different.
But it's still relative because for her, I bet, Sarah still had to make sacrifices as well. From our perspective, okay, and from Rachel's, the sacrifices aren't as great. But she still, because, she lost all of the income
I'm not
potential of her
saying she's not
husband.
struggling. I'm not
Oh,
saying
okay.
that. What I'm saying
But you're
is,
not, but Rachel is.
no, she's not. She's saying
not-
you're
not struggling as
but
much.
for a lot of different reasons. One of them being that the entire society is willing to prop this person up and say your pain matters, and everyone looks at her and says, well, at least you didn't have kids.
She didn't say
You
that.
had a body.
She didn't say at least you didn't have kids.
All right,
Anyway.
we should break.
We're going to sit here and argue until we're just like going to brawl. This is one of those moments where I'm actually a little pissed at you, and that's okay because I know you're pissed at me too. So we're going to finish this, and
Wait,
I'm
who,
going
me?
to.
No, I'm not pissed at all.
Okay. Whatever you say then.
Oh, jeez.
What's the point of fiction?
Should we rate?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, who's gonna go first?
I'll go first. 5.5. I really liked it. Ah, look, Gerald approves.
Gerald?
Top of the shop, 6 out of 6 for me.
Oh wow.
Oof. I almost gave it a 6, but I was just like, I don't know. Yeah, 5.5.
I was gonna give it a 4, but then I argued with Rami, so now I'm gonna bump it up to a 5.
Alright, that might counterbalance my rating a bit. It's 2.5.
Whoa,
Yeah.
that's harsh.
I almost want to revise this to a 6 because you know what? I feel like I'm giving it a 5.5 because I don't feel like it wowed me in a way that other 6s have. But this is going to stay with me because what it's saying is the kind of thing that you think about again and will come up
It
in
is gonna
conversation
stay
with
with
other
you.
people.
I
Yeah.
can't bump it for that because I had too many issues with the beginning of the story. But yeah, it's totally gonna stay with me. And the fact is, it made us argue.
Yeah, it's a 6. This has got a lot of meat to it.
Yay! And the reason, I mean, I channel my inner Rami for this story because I had heard of it before, and I think it sort of crossed my conscience somehow, and I thought, oh, I like this, and when I read it, I liked it even more because I remembered it. I remembered what it was about. I remembered just about everything from it. So it's several years later, it stayed with me. So it's I've got no hesitation in giving it a 6.
Yeah. When I read it the second time, there were lines that on the first read through I really liked, and the second time I was like, oh, that's right, that line was great. Like I was still excited about it.
You're funny. You're so cute. It's like, oh, we're back at that line again.
Basically.
We're all such nerds.
Okay, so we've finished rating, so we'll put this story to one side.
Okay.
We're friends again.
Yeah, we're friends again. Rami doesn't hate me. Is he
You guys
gonna make me read more fables now?
I was just gonna say, because I'm pressed for time and I gotta go. I think my ride is here. I'm not 100% sure. So I'm like, should I even compete in the game? Because I'm thinking I might. Do you need me for the game real badly? Here's the
Aw.
thing, I don't want to win. Even though my story that I have recommended is great, I'm not going to have time to do the summary and look for a game.
Okay,
Oh.
go away. Come
Thanks,
back
Anais.
another
Thanks,
day.
Anais. Yeah, see
Yeah.
you soon.
All right, I'll see you guys soon, and we need to figure out what
Bye.
recording is. Okay.
All
Yeah,
right.
Bye,
we'll do.
guys. It was a
Bye,
lot of
Anais.
fun.
Enjoy.
Bye.
However, am I going to survive with just the boys?
Well, maybe, I mean, you
Oh,
can win now.
Annie's go
Yeah.
away. That's what she said.
Now you can win.
You'll be okay, I'm sure.
Okay.
Oh,
Bye.
okay,
Bye.
so I'm hosting
Uh-oh.
the game.
This is gonna be
Hello.
hard.
What stories do you want to read next week?
I want to read The Yellow Wallpaper by Charlotte Perkins Gilman. It was written in 1899, and it was a really important work of fiction about mental illness and women in the Victorian era.
Wow. I'm going back to one of my stories that I nominated a few times before, but didn't win yet, and that's 3 Questions by Leo Tolstoy. Also an old
Ooh, I want to. Ooh.
Me too.
Now I can't decide who I want to win, you or me. Because that's a good
It's a
one.
win-win. It's a win-win situation.
Total win-win.
Hey, Maya, guess what? You don't decide who wins. I decide.
Look at him getting all bossy.
Yeah. He and Anais rated it 6. Oh, we've drawn a line in the pan. Okay.
Oh, you're going to make us fight again just when we're starting to get friendly. Just when we like each other again.
Since that wonderful story was all about prepositions, which is, of course, a part of speech,
Oh,
I will-
Lord.
I'm going to read out a sentence, and I just preface this by saying I would have trouble with these two, so
Oof.
don't feel too bad. I'm going to read out a sentence with a word highlighted. I shall highlight a word, and I will give you 3 possible types.
Let me just say something, Gerald.
Go on.
But I love how
When
both
I
Maya
grew
and I
up-
did a face palm.
When I grew up, I moved around a lot. Like every couple months, I was in a different school. And it was during the time when we were switching from teaching English to whole language, which was a stupid concept where if children just heard enough stories, they would naturally absorb grammar and spelling. I did not learn where a comma went until 10th grade French. This is not going to be pretty.
Well, I'll tell you what, since you're both not keen on this,
No,
I
we
have
can do it. We can do it. I'm
No,
just
let's
saying,
give it a
this is
shot.
this is gonna be rough. This is gonna be real rough, dude.
Okay. Well, I have got a
Rami
sort
went to a
of-
good school, so he'll win.
No, but for me, I guess this applies to both of us, but it's also 6 in the morning right now, so it's not
You got
ideal
an hour
time
on
for
me.
grammar.
Suck it up, guys. Suck it up.
Oh, Rami, just take your winnings. Make us read Tolstoy.
Okay.
Let's go. Let's
Maya,
get it on.
Right, let's get it on. Maya, the sentence is, I bought a beautiful dress at the mall. And the word highlighted is beautiful. Is it a preposition, an adjective, or a noun?
An adjective.
Yay!
All right.
Maya, what?
Let's
See?
keep it at that level. We should be good.
What, you don't want to diagram any sentences at 6 in the morning, Rami?
I think it gets a little harder.
Oh boy.
Screw you.
Sentence, that's not very nice. Sentence 2. What did she ask you to do? The word is she. What did she ask you to do? Is it a conjunction, a preposition, or a pronoun?
Pronoun.
Yay! See?
All right.
There you go. I left my shoes under the table. The word under, is it adjective, preposition, or pronoun, Maya?
Preposition.
It is a preposition.
Nice.
I learned that from the story.
Yep. Anything an airplane could do to a cloud.
Yeah,
Like that.
or a building. If we, that's too soon. If we finish our work quickly, we can go to the movies. The word quickly, is it an
Adverb.
It's an adverb. Very good.
You were just on that, Rami. Look how smart you are. Now that's why you're on this podcast. You're just so smart.
Stop
I was
jinxing.
sounding quite condescending here, so.
No, I was just trying to make him nervous so he'd lose the next question.
He always does this every time, and I always lose when you do.
Okay, next sentence. On Saturdays, I work from 9 to 5. Work is the word. Is it a verb, a preposition, or an adverb?
Verb.
Is correct.
Working 9 to 5. What a way to make a living.
Cue for Maya to sing. Rami, I want to go to a university in the United States. Is the word university adjective, preposition, or noun?
Noun.
Is correct. Maya, I'm sure I have met your girlfriend before. That's a bit clumsy anyway. The word met, is it verb, preposition, or interjection?
Verb.
Is correct.
Ooh, that was a trick question. That was hard.
Rami,
Yeah.
the sentence is, well, I don't think I will be here to answer the phone. The word is well, and is it interjection, preposition, or pronoun?
Interjection.
Is correct. These are just too easy.
Wow. I didn't get
And it looks
that
like
was
we
hard.
might be heading for the tiebreaker anyway. Okay, Maya, Andy knocked on the door, but no one answered. The word but, is it adjective, adverb, or conjunction?
Conjunction.
Is correct. So, Rami, to tie the game, after lunch, let's go out for a coffee. The word after, is it pronoun, preposition, or verb?
Preposition.
Is correct.
Wow.
Okay, now then, the tiebreaker. This is.
We were both so nervous.
Yeah, it was easier
This is
than. Could have made it a
insane.
little more tricky.
It wasn't. Yeah, it wasn't too bad. Now, with tenses in the English language. So some say there's future and past, but I have a list of.
Were you looking at my editor's notes from my last project?
No. I have the answer to a question. How many tenses are there in the English language?
Oh, what?
And it's more than 2. So it's including complex tenses. So, Maya, how many tenses do you think there are in the English language?
Nine?
9, okay. And Rami?
Let's go with 7.
Now, I thought you'd go more. Maya wins because I have a list of 16 here.
I was going to say 12.
Do you want me to read them to you? No, you don't really.
No, because I have a
It's
list
okay.
of them, and there's all these weird ones.
Yeah, it's like future perfect continuous and
Mm-hmm.
future perfect
Yep.
continuous in the past. I would have been playing. I play. I am playing. I have played. I will play. I
Yeah,
will be
that's what
playing.
happens when you overcompensate for growing up with bad grammar by becoming a grammar nerd.
Grammar nerds are okay.
Yeah, I'm still working on my wings.
So Maya, what will we be reading next
Oh
week?
wow, I actually get to do a story.
Yeah.
Wow, I maybe should have picked a different one. We're going to read like the story I tried to get into the podcast for like 4 weeks in a row. We're going to read The Yellow Wallpaper by Charlotte Perkins Gilman.
Cool.
Oh, and Anais isn't here to do that.
We're all like, where's our outro? Where's our interesting outro? Okay, well, so this is the end of the podcast.
Thank you. Come again.
Thank you for listening to Literary Roadhouse, and without Anais, we are all completely stumped.
Oh, jeez.
I can't stop laughing.
It's one of those podcasts.
Okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this with a straight face. Thank you for listening to Literary Roadhouse.
Lies.
Do you want me to do it? let me try it. And it'll just be in my
And we're
audio.
completely incompetent.
Thank you for listening to Literary Roadhouse. Join us next week for another discussion on a literary short story.
And if you would like to leave a comment or rate or subscribe, literaryroadhouse.com.
And all that, yeah.
We're really useless without Anais.
She'll crack up when she listens to this.
She's gonna totally die when she hears this.
I want to give it a shot, though. What would you say? Like, if you want to reflect upon tragic events in the past, or whether you think life is fair or not, let us know.
I got it.
Leave a comment.
Since life is unfair, why don't you do the fair thing and leave a comment?
Yeah, that's more like it. Yeah.
Or you can go to iTunes and leave a review and talk about how unfair we are. She would totally do something like that. We love her.
Here we go. This is her proper outro. It says, let's play another game. That's how she'd do it. Count the prepositions in my next sentence. But after this podcast, it's a great. She'll probably do it.
I need you to read it. Go ahead and do her outro. Yes.
Okay.
I'll use it.
Okay. Let's play another game. Count the prepositions in my next sentence. Before you read the story, but after this podcast finishes, go to our website at literaryroadhouse.com and share your thoughts about this week's story in the comments section, along with how many prepositions I've just said. So many prepositions. While you're there, leave a review on iTunes, Stitcher, and Spreaker, and share this podcast with your friends. Until next time.
Read a good story.
Ooh.
There you go.
That was great.
There you go.
I'm totally going to use that and then cut in all of our outtakes.
Yeah.
Oh my god, that was awesome, guys.